co-host. Farah, can you hear me?
I can. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic start to Ramadan.
It's really, really good to see a lot of different faces around here as well. And I think one thing we want to say right at the beginning is welcome to the Ramadan Open Iftar, but also welcome to everyone online as well. So we've got the Islam channel family joining us today as well on YouTube, on Facebook, and as well as the people over here as well. As we go, can we invite everyone to open their cameras, get involved, and show us your lovely faces as you're at home as well, if you're comfortable to do so, obviously.
And also,
a lot more
anyone who's joining us, from Islam channel, you can join us on Zoom and be live on Zoom if you'd like to interact with us, if you'd like to chat with us. Just go to the Ramadan Tent Project page and you can log on to Zoom from there and post questions for Adnan, myself, and our guest speaker today.
Perfect, thank you, Farah. So we have a pretty jam-packed event, and I am conscious of time as well. So I'll give a quick, brief introduction to RGP, and then I'll move on to Farah to give us a bit more of an agenda going forward, before bringing our host on as well afterwards. So for those that have joined before, they already know, but RGP, the Ramadan Tent Project, is a non-profit organization founded in 2013. And our mission really is to try and bring communities together to better understand each other. We've empowered individuals, facilitated dialogues, and raised a lot of awareness around important social issues and worked together in a more cohesive society as well. This right here is a flagship event. It's the Open Iftar. It's the UK's largest community event in Ramadan, and invites Muslims and people of all faith, culture, backgrounds to explore the Islamic faith and share the Ramadan spirit through food, inspirational talks, and engaging discussions. That's a quick, brief introduction to RGP. I'll pass it on to you, Farah, for a brief agenda on what's happening today.
Thanks so much, Adnan. So again, thank you to Islam Channel, and also, we'd like to thank the Arts Council UK as well for allowing our Ramadan events to continue this year. We really, really, really appreciate it. So today we have our speaker, Richard Sudworth, and following that we'll have a Q&A. And Maghrib Adhan is at 7, not 5:56, 7:56 today. And a little bit about Richard. Richard is the Secretary for Interreligious Affairs for the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's based in Birmingham. And Richard has been a parish priest in very mixed inner city areas of Birmingham. And before that, Richard also worked in North Africa as well. And he's done doctoral studies on Christian and Muslim relations. So that's a little bit about Richard. Now, before we go over to Richard, as Adnan has said, we love to keep this interactive. Please make use of our chat box. We love hearing from you. We love hearing your questions. And most importantly, what everyone, or anyone who's started Ramadan today, I'm conscious some people are starting tomorrow, what everyone is having for iftar as well. Isn't that right, Adnan?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's the first day in today, and we're going to go straight into the food because, it's only the right thing to do. Just before I get into that, I also want to just give a quick overview for anyone sort of new to Zoom or is in the technology realm as well. But you have the reaction buttons at the bottom. You can use these to either raise your hand if you want to ask a question, or you can sort of give your emotions as well if you're surprised by anything or of that sort. If you agree or disagree with anything as well, or simply if you just want to say something as well. This is supposed to be interactive. We want as many people as possible to interact with us and sort of share their thoughts process as well. So at any point you have any questions as well, just put them in the chat, either openly to all of us, or you can directly message myself and Farah as well. So just a quick one over there for that housekeeping. But who wants to engage? We always like to engage with someone in the audience. Who would like to go and have a little chat if you're comfortable? You can just raise
your hands. Oh, sorry. If you who would like to sort of say how that. Everyone knows, I'm assuming, how to use the reactions button. So who's fasting today? We'd be interested in who's fasting today. So can you use the reactions button to show who's fasting today? Nobody? Oh no, we've got Saeed. Oh, fantastic. All right, so quite a few. Can somebody sort of give me a wave if you'd like to share your experience as well? And who's outside the UK as well today? Is everyone calling from the UK, or is anyone from outside the UK? So post in the chat box.
Oh, I think Istanbul. Sarah's from Istanbul.
Sarah's in Istanbul.
Wow, okay.
Wow, Sarah, do you want to give us a little overview of what it's like in Istanbul at the moment? Okay.
Warm, she says.
It's warm and it's Isha time. Okay. So I sort of head off to pray then at the moment. Adnan, Reading side. Do you want to tell us about how your are you happy to share how your fast has gone today? UK Reading. Anyone else? Do keep posting in the chat box.
It's around the corner from me. I'm in Reading as well. Well, we're
I know.
popular, good to see.
What are you having for dinner today, Adnan? And
me, I'm gonna open the fridge and I'm gonna pick everything from each shelf. It's one of those days. I can't. Whatever I see is going straight into my mouth. So it's not the conventional answer, but that's me. What about yourself?
Do you know what? I think it might be pretty much the same.
Go on.
I'm very organised on my breakfast, so I don't know what everyone does for breakfast, but I find overnight oats really, really work. So I went out today and I got some peanut butter because, you know, overnight oats, peanut butter, they've kept me going all day.
Why not? A bit of everything.
What sort of interesting breakfast is everyone having? What works? You know what, I'd be really interested to know what breakfast works for everyone during Ramadan. You know, what actually
good question. Yeah.
Really full during Ramadan? Because the days are just going to get longer, right?
They are. I think we're going to be like an hour and a half longer by the end of it. An hour and a half longer. So 3:30 in the morning. What are we having? Oats and dates, Said says again.
And you can't
go wrong. That's a good point.
Cereal. Is that like a big bowl of cereal, Rehan? Porridge. Anyone else? Oats seem to be the thing. What do you have, Adnan? I'm curious.
In the morning, I am, you know, the cookie cream cereal that you get. That's me.
Oh God, that sounds
goes down well. And porridge, you know, like you can't go wrong with porridge as well.
Do you know what? I did porridge for so long, and I remember my mum used to make us porridge, and for my sister and I, and we used to literally fight over who had the smallest bowl of porridge. So, you know, the mummy bear, the baby bear, and like the middle bear. So I know that's bigger. No, you had the bigger one last time. So ever since I discovered overnight oats,
got to be done. I was in Egypt a couple of months back, and the concept of breakfast is completely different. It's actually brunch. You go all out. You don't have small portions. And when I say a huge brunch, I'm talking about 6 or 7 different plates of different types of things. You have bread with everything. You have fool, which is like beans. You have dessert on top of it. It's what it's called now, but it has honey on top. 3 different types of honey. It doesn't stop. So now that I've got everyone, now that everyone's starving now, I'm thinking of all the food, and I'm looking at time as well. I think it might be time to get into the talk.
I think so. So Richard, over to you. Can you are you able to connect? No, should we seem to still be on?
Let me
unmute.
Yeah. Richard, you should be
able to. I'm now unmuted. Fantastic.
Fantastic. What are you having for breakfast? What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Muesli and some toast and marmalade.
Can't go wrong.
That sounds very nice. Right, over to you, Richard.
I have to say, all this talk of food, all of you who are fasting must be absolutely starving now. Your tummy's rumbling, so I've got to distract you for the next little while. Just first of all, let me thank you for the warm welcome. It's lovely to join you. I was with you during last year's Ramadan with the Archbishop, and prior to that in person, and I really look forward to joining you all at another open iftar in one of the squares in London or perhaps elsewhere in the next year or so. I really hope we get to see this kind of thing. Yeah, just got a few thoughts and perhaps some probing questions for all of us and reflections perhaps on the last year. And got this title I've been given, Compassion and Solidarity. But again, before I jump in, just let me wish you every blessing for Ramadan, that God's presence will be with you. And again, very, very big thank you for hosting me as a guest and as a non-Muslim into this first evening of virtual open iftars. So I feel very, very honoured. Thank you. Well, what a strange year. How many of us would have imagined this lockdown phase of our lives even just over a year ago? Who could have anticipated virtual iftars like this, or church services with social distancing, mask wearing, and services without singing? Eid without visits to family and friends. Easter without the bread and wine of Holy Communion for Christians. I wonder who you would mention in listing people who have demonstrated heroism and virtue over the last year or so. Might want to think for a moment, particular people that you may even know. I suspect high on all our lists would be frontline workers of all sorts. Yes, doctors and nurses braving the pandemic at its worst to continue to provide life-saving care and dignity to those who have been ill or are dying, but also teachers, cleaners, shop workers, all those who have ensured we stay fed, secure, educated. What all these examples have in common is action on behalf of others at risk to self. Been asked to talk about compassion and solidarity. When people go into places and situations for us and in ways that expose them to the rough and tumble of risk that we may otherwise experience, they are demonstrating solidarity. That other word, compassion, extends that notion of solidarity into shared suffering. It literally means, the etymology of the word in English, compassion, is with suffering. In the Christian faith, the passion is the suffering and death of Jesus at the cross, what we remember on Good Friday. Those vivid images of exhausted frontline workers, faces smeared with long hours of mask wearing and the hot weight of heavy protective clothing, are a testimony to true understanding of solidarity and compassion, of suffering with. We would have liked to have hugged our ill friends, or anyone actually, over these last few months beyond our households, hugging our grandparents in care homes. But countless people have done this for us and been with us in these simple acts of faithful generosity. Sam Wells is the priest at St Martin in the Field, and if you go to Trafalgar Square, see the big Nelson's column, it's the church that's by Trafalgar Square. The vicar there, Sam Wells, is also a theologian of ethics, and he talks of different ways that God engages with humanity. Along with what he calls doing for, doing to, being for, he says that the supreme action of God, in his view, is very simply being with. You see, along with the heroic actions of service that we rightly recognise, what this last year has revealed is also our deep need for the simple presence of another beside us, without agenda, without any distortion of power or dependence. I'd like to suggest that some of our real heroes have just listened, just heard, loved us for who we are in the midst of pain and loss. There are many for whom the griefs of this last year, or the mental illness occasioned by deepened isolation, demand bare solidarity, just being with. There's been a growing appreciation, discussions in the Church of England at this time about the practice of what we call lament, something we see in the books of the Psalms, a pouring out before God of our pain, not for the achievement or of any answer, not even for resolution, but to be with the God who is with us, who loves us. It's an instinct familiar to those that work with the dying. Put away easy words. Stop trying to make it all right. Some things are just not all right. Just be with. Let me rewind a bit, though, and this is where it gets a bit complicated and where I'm going to pose as many questions as I'm going to say stuff. You may be very correctly asking questions of what I said about compassion and solidarity and the nature of God. Can we actually state that God is with us, alongside us in any identifiable way? God is God. We can't make God into a human being with virtuous instincts that we see in humans put onto God. In both Christianity and Islam, in the mainstream traditions, God does not suffer. God cannot share our pain, otherwise he won't be God. Now, I'm not going to go in deeply into all of those big, huge theological questions, but just to offer some reflections. For Christians, the identification of God with humans comes in the life of Jesus Christ, in our conviction that the very being of God is entered into the world in the form of a human, in the frame of our common mortality. In the Christian tradition, that supreme being with of God is through Jesus. But there is still a great mystery, still huge questions about what that means for our understanding of God. So in the Bible readings that Christians have had, and I love it when our festivals jam up against each other, and particularly at this time, because there is this sense of shared deprivation. I know from my Muslim friends and from having enjoyed it so personally with friends and neighbours as well, how much it will pain you to be doing this virtually. I know the talk of food is not just because your stomachs are rumbling, but because actually you'd love to be with your wider family, digging deep into the food that's been prepared shortly. That's a huge loss. And many other communities, Vaisakhi today, Sikhs and some Hindus, Jews have been celebrating Passover, Pesach. Clustered together, we get to share some of the things that we do have in common. And the Bible readings that Christians have running up to Easter, they look forward to Good Friday, the Passion, the death of Jesus. And when they talk about that, they talk about that death of Jesus somehow revealing the glory of God. How can it be, though? It's hope for Christians. It's a heart of Christians' faith, but it's a huge mystery how we hold together the power, the transcendence of God, the otherness of God, the one God, with the events of the first century Jewish rabbi Jesus. That's a conundrum for my faith, a great mystery. And for Muslims, and I'll be intrigued to hear how you wrestle with this, or what you think of what I'm suggesting here. For Muslims, I wonder at the names for Allah, for God, found in human words, because there are no other words that we can use but human words. Allah the compassionate, the merciful. Ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahman, the most merciful. In the absolute affirmation of the one God in Islam, it seems that there is no space for the kind of vicarious sufferings that Christians have in the life and death of Jesus. But there are mysterious suggestions, aren't there, in Islam? I believe that the Arabic root that gives the word for Rahman, the most merciful, Rahm, is the Arabic for a womb. I think of the travails of labour, of the pain of giving birth that a mother has, and wonder at the compassion of God towards his world. I think of a really mysterious passage in the Quran in Surah 230, and many of you will know this off by heart and be able to recite it in Arabic, I'm sure. When God announces that he will delegate sovereignty to human beings on the earth, and I don't know whether you've ever noticed this, but the angels cry out, Lord, are you submitting your creation to this fickle creature who will corrupt in the earth and shed blood? It's an extraordinary passage because the cry of the angels suggests that God is taking a risk, even making himself vulnerable. How can this be? Now, I think both Christian and Muslim faiths wrestle with this paradox of God's oneness, and yet he's relating to us in our mortality with our choices. And yes, we come at these questions differently. But the reply from God in the Quranic text is, and I'm sure many of you know this in Arabic, I know what to you is unknown. There is mystery again. Some things we just do not know. And stepping back for me as a Christian, I look at the lived lives of so many Muslims and see this capacity for being with, suffering with, and I cannot but praise God, who is the source of all that is good, surely, the lifeblood, inspiration for any action that we might call virtuous. It's been interesting hearing stories of Archbishop Justin after he's visited as a voluntary chaplain in St Thomas Hospital in London. It's just across the road from Lambeth Palace. And during the pandemic, he's been going at least once a week. Some people don't recognise him, and I think he enjoys that with his mask on. So he just goes there as an ordinary Christian chaplain, and some do recognise him. And even today, he was sharing a story of how there's a Muslim dying in a ward, and the family were wanting, and in their words were, please, someone, anyone, can they pray with our grandmother? And Archbishop Justin sat by the bed and prayed with this family. And for him, he was in his conversation today, it was one of the most moving moments of this last pandemic. A shared glimpse, a shared solidarity. And Archbishop Justin has talked of very moving stories of Christian, Muslim, other faith and no faith, doctors, nurses, relatives, being with the sick and the dying. I do love the theology, the philosophy, and you could probably guess that from some of what I've said. I love the big questions posed by these kinds of explorations. But at the end of the day, compassion and solidarity give me the mystery, because these are virtues that light up the world when it's dark. And I should just receive them for what they are, however our different faiths understand them. It's been really encouraging to me to see how throughout this last year, there's been solidarity across many of our faith traditions, because we've both known, Christians and Muslims and others, the pain of closed mosques and churches, the solidarity of choosing social distancing when so many of our practices intrinsic to our faiths require touch. I know one of the things when I first ever went into a mosque and just sat with Muslims in prayer, one of the things that struck me was the solidarity of men praying shoulder to shoulder. Really visceral. That's powerful. And you guys are missing that, aren't you? Like we're missing singing songs and the bread and wine of communion. The shared solidarity of knowing some of our major festivals have been really stripped back. At a time when being with physically has not been possible, there has been a profound being with in compassionate decisions for the common good, so that the pandemic should not spread. I want to finish by just reiterating again that compassion and solidarity sometimes do not require any action from us. Sometimes that's the first thing we want to do. We want to do something. Sometimes silence is what is required. Just being alongside, being with, is often enough. In that spirit, and as you begin to move into your time of prayer, and before our few minutes of Q&A, I'd just like to suggest a few minutes of silence, or a few moments, not minutes, that'll be far too long. A moment to recall ourselves before the Creator God, being with the compassionate, most merciful, who is with us. Let's have a pause for a moment. Amen. And I think we got some questions now.
Thank you very much. That was really, really good. I really enjoyed that as well. And there's a couple of things I want to pick up on as well in a little bit, because I think there's more questions coming up first. And from everyone else as well, I mean, get your questions in. You can also ask them directly if you like as well. I know Farah has one to start off with.
Thank you, Richard. That was, absolutely, wonderful. And just a couple of points I picked up on. The supreme act of, God is just being with, and, the need for a presence without distortion, and being with the God, who just loves us, that God is compassionate and merciful. And I think also often that we forget this, God is a source of virtuous action as well. And thank you also for sharing the story about Archbishop Justice and the shared solidarity and compassion. That was really nice and really touching. And I totally agree that sometimes, compassion and solidarity just need silence. Just being with someone is enough. And we're going through difficult times, and I think it's fantastic you touched on, that we need to stop making things all right and just to be with things. And that's something I've been, consciously practicing for a while. But what I think, much of our audience would like to know as well, how do we make this easier? And how do we use Ramadan to practice this and deal with the effects of lockdown as we enter a so-called normality, just to, be with things?
Gosh, big questions. I mean, I won't dare to suggest practices within your own faith that you should take up or develop in terms of making us resilient through this, but perhaps just share what's been real for me, and that there may be echoes that are appropriate for you. I think practicing the presence in silence is a really good discipline. And in many ways, what the pandemic has done, which is why I think the rates of mental illness have shot up. It's pushed us back on our own resources. And I think we need to develop disciplines in terms of listening to ourselves, and listening to God, listening to God's voice. And that's hard work. And actually that can be a bit scary. And I think as we begin to come out of versions of lockdown, I think there are understandably lots of different reactions. There are some people, and I see it already in people out in pub gardens and wanting to get the haircut and go shopping, and then there are others who are really terrified, and it's another readjustment. And I think it pays us to just pause and listen to what's going on. And what we do share as Christians and Muslims is that we are made fearfully and wonderfully by a loving Creator God. listening to, I mean, there's a Bible phrase, listening to that still small voice, which might mean switching off the TV and the audio headphones and just being silent for a bit.
Thank you so much, Richard. That's wonderful. I'm going to hand over to Adnan, and we have some questions from our audience as well. So Adnan, over to you.
Thank you, Farah. Reverend Richard, just going back on your talk, you mentioned you'd be also interested to hear some other words that sort of resonate with ourselves as well, names of God, for example, and names of Allah. And the one that came to my mind was Ar-Razak, and Razak in this sense was the provider, the sustainer, and the bestower of sustenance, so the all provider. And the reason why that one stuck out to me the most is in times like this, and not even if it was COVID or pandemic or anything else like that, but just going through Ramadan each year, I have this firm belief, and I'm sure many other people do as well, that you will receive from above. Like, God will give you, and there will be some sort of sustenance. So those people that might be heavily affected or are going through really difficult, challenging times, there's always that belief that there's something better at the end of this, because Allah is Al-Razak. He is the provider. He is a sustainer. He is the one who gives. So I just wanted to share that. And before I move on to the next question, and I believe Hawazin has a question, and we would like to invite Hawazin to ask this question. Can I unmute somehow?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Assalamu alaikum. Hi, everyone. First, thank you, Reverend, for your beautiful talk about compassion. I think it's really interesting, and it's a really interesting and deep theme, in particular during Ramadan. And I was wondering, actually, how up to you we can improve compassion between one another in our everyday life, because I feel like sometimes there is so many, there is like a fight of the egos, or I don't know, like we are not always that kind between one another. So how can we improve this in our everyday life? To you, if you have any advice?
Gosh, that's a really good question. In one sense, I think I'd probably begin with problematizing the whole thing, because on one level, we can't engineer this stuff, and there is no magic wand. I think there are disciplines and practices that help. And for me as a Christian, I think patterns of prayer, of community, and importantly, in a social media age, I think compassion is often in short supply. I was talking with a colleague today about just how toxic social media environment can be. So when I talk about the importance of community, I think being in a community that's diverse, so that we get to hear the challenges of different opinions, different voices, rather than having echo chambers, I think those things really help. Yeah, and listening to people. It's interesting. I remarked the other day that a series of signs, sort of cardboard printed signs around Birmingham, and I'd not noticed them before. And so, what's that? And it was something. It's something like "Walk in my shoes," and apparently it's part of a mental health campaign. My daughter's pointing out it's a national campaign. Walk a mile in my shoes, I think it is. And there's something about that. How do we listen and hear each other? Because we become more compassionate when we know where they're coming from.
True.
Yeah, but great question.
Thank you. Great talk.
Thank you, Hawazin, for your question. Thank you, Richard, as well, for the response. There's been a lot of comments as well saying lovely responses and great words as well. We've got a couple more questions, which I'll pass on to Farah as well. Just before I do that as well, just to highlight as well, we have about 5 more minutes, let's say,
Cool.
before we want to sort of conclude, and then sort of have a 2-minute silence and break before the azan as well. So Farah, on to you.
So we have Rehan here. So Rehan has a question for you as well, Richard. So over to you, Rehan.
Hi, Richard. Thank you again for your talk. So my question is there any sort of change, because you talked a lot about how you've had to change the way the church is run during the pandemic, like social distancing, singing. Is there anything that you've had to do that you'd sort of like to continue? For example, in our mosque, like sometimes we have to have bookings and stuff. People have to sign up their name before they go, which is sort of quite good in the way because it does kind of control the crowds a little bit. And like some of our imams have been doing stuff online. So is there anything that you'd like to continue? Because I know there's a lot of things that you probably want to return to, but is there anything that you think has made churches run a bit, a bit more accessible, a bit better?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll pick one thing. Many of our churches, and my local church, for example, on a Sunday morning, it's Zoom. So there's an early morning service that you have to book in, and a small number go to that. But most people attend a kind of Zoom virtual church. And I think what is here to stay, and is a good thing, is that many churches will be blended or hybrid. I'll come up with those words. So they have to offer something physical, person to person, because that's how we're made as human beings, but also have a virtual offering, a digital offering. And it's interesting, I've been involved in some of the weekly online services produced by the Church of England, and disability groups in the church have been telling us, look, we've been doing this for years, because if you're chronically ill and stuck at home with a physical disability, you can't get to church anyway. So welcome to our world, because we're suddenly been accessing more stuff because you're putting stuff out there that's virtual. So, there are lots of people that are going, great, I can now feel part of a church community because I'm stuck at home most of the time. So that's one of the things I think is here to stay, and it's good.
Sorry, Farah,
Thank you so much, Richard. Sorry, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. Adnan, I believe we have one more question that you want to ask on behalf of one of our guests who's left.
Yeah, before I ask the question, just to echo on that points you were raising as well, Sarah has also mentioned Zoom has been brilliant in allowing so many people to participate in Open Iftar for a second year. Maybe people who wouldn't be able to attend face-to-face have had the opportunity as well. Really good point over here as well. And the question was, yes, so Freya is not here. She asked, how do you see solidarity in a world that remains so divided and polarized at the moment? It's a pretty big one again.
Yeah, I'm really pragmatic, and I guess one of the Christian beliefs is that human beings sin. We get stuff wrong. So I'm not sure we can solve the world's problems. We need to do what we're called to do. And yes, try and make a difference on behalf of so many, but actually, on one level, these big questions, global questions of division and violence, on one level, they're not going to go away. But what are we called to do? What's God saying of our lives, and how we can make a stand and make a difference?
Amazing, thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Richard. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing with us your thoughts on solidarity and compassion. And thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you everyone for keeping the chat box interactive. And we're really looking forward to everyone joining us every evening. Richard, I hope you'll be able to join us again as well during the course of Ramadan. That's fantastic. And now just a few points to, Sarah also said thank you. Big thank yous from everyone, Richard, in the chat box. And now over to Adnan just to go through a final few bits before we go over to Adnan. So over to you, Adnan.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And just to echo, I mean, on what Farah's saying as well, thank you, Richard, for your time. Honestly, it's really appreciated. I mean, if you can see the comments themselves just coming in now as well, everyone's really just definitely enjoyed that and benefited from it as well. Sarah says, I've been listening and cooking. So multitaskers over here as well. And that's really good to see. And this is the essence of what I want to say in the last couple of minutes before we go to Azan as well. Is the essence of having Open Iftar. And my first time I ever went to Open Iftar was live, was in public in 2019. That was a year I decided to join the organization and be part of something that brought people together. And so the year after was online. However, I'm still here and I'm really enjoying it, and I've met a lot of people. And part of this is why it's important to hold something sustainable, like virtual Open Iftar. And we have to thank our sponsors and partners for this as well. So the Islam Channel this year has done extraordinary support for us to be able to host this. And they've also been able to host us on their channels on YouTube, on Facebook, and we will be here every single day with new guest speakers and more things happening on board as well. We'd also like to thank the Art Council as well, UK. So they've also supported us through this and helped us to really build ourselves. I know this is the second year only, but I'm sure it's going to get bigger and better from here as well. Last and not least, everyone over here that's joined us, that's on the Zoom call, but also on YouTube or any of the other platforms. This wouldn't be anything without you guys. So we have to sort of thank every single one, because it's you who make it. So from the bottom of our hearts, I mean, it's been the first day. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure you have, Farah, too, as well. Thank you, Reverend Richard, for joining us. If you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to add, more than welcome to. We have a couple of minutes left, and then we'll probably go into a minute silence, a minute reflection time before the Azan goes.
Just thank you for your graciousness and welcome again. And yeah, just urge you to listen to that still small voice in this next month of Ramadan. And Salam alaikum.
Salam alaikum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll go into a reflection period for the last less than a minute. Ramadan Mubarak, everyone.
اللهم إني لك صمت وبك آمنت وعلى رزقك أفطرت. ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته إنك لا تخلف الميعاد.
Everyone for joining us today. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. Richard, thank you so much. Our audience, thank you so much. Please join us every single day in Ramadan. Thank you to the Islam Council. Thank you to the Arts Council as well, Islam Channel and the Arts Council. And Adnan, is there any final words you'd like to say before we go off to have a little bite to eat?
Time for food. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm out.
Thank you so much. See you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you again, Richard. Thank you, everyone.